welcome, and thank you for listening to the podcast of the Vineyard Church in Maryville, Tennessee. If you haven't already, you can always visit our website for more information at vineyardchurch.us. In addition to Sunday's message, we're taking some time for conversations, a sort of look behind the scenes. In today's episode, we hear an encouraging story of healing from Melissa Webb, a conversation with Zac Weaver, our new kids and associate youth pastor, and in closing, a bit from Sharon and Aaron McCarter about a new church guideline. To start things today, Aaron and I talk a bit about the process and why we're making our move to add a third service and some info about the Church Center app. Thanks for joining us.
Hey guys, I am here with David.
Yes, sir.
And we're just going to go through a couple of announcements here. Stuff that we said we're going to use this podcast mostly for things we don't have time to say on Sunday.
Right.
But some things need to be said again and again and again.
We need to say them everywhere.
Yes. And so we're going to say them here as well. The first is a service times change.
Yeah, so we're adding the third service. So we're starting September 11th. We're moving. We have to adjust all the service times.
Yeah.
There's just no way around it. Mm-hmm. I wish there was. But so it'll be 8:30, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I can get it. 8:30, yeah. 10, and 11:30.
Yep.
Starting September 11th. Just to that point, it might be concerning to hear your worship pastor not know when the service times are. That's because I just get here really early. So yes, I'm just ready to go all day. Anyway.
Yes, you are. You're such an early bird.
3 services coming, and we need it. It was kind of unavoidable.
Yes. We didn't decide too early. That's for sure.
No, in fact, we just so you guys know, we pushed it as long as we could. We started to feel that need before the summer, if I'm remembering correctly. Mm-hmm. And we said, let's see if we can sneak through and get to the summer. Things kind of get a little bit different during the summer. And we also wanted to see, we're out of the summer, wanted to see how things would land. And it's a wonderful challenge, the space challenge, because we have people who are coming, which is great, who want to have space for people. Yeah. And this is not a new idea, but when a person might come into a room and doesn't feel like there's space, that's not the experience we want for people to have. Yeah. So that's kind of what's pushing that, what's driving it.
Yeah, it turns people away. They don't feel welcome, they don't feel needed. Yeah. And we want to make sure we have a way to really say welcome with our whole hearts, because that's what we feel.
Yes,
and,
exactly.
It's always exciting when the church grows through the summer. That usually means big things for the fall, and that's what we experienced. Yep. We held off through the summer.
We did. I promise.
We squeezed in for a few services, but
and that's in all the spaces too. Like that's kids' spaces too. Are feeling that
for sure.
We need a little release valve, I think.
And crowded in a kid's room is a different dynamic than crowded in the sanctuary.
Indeed.
It's very intense. So anyway, 8:30, 10, 11:30, and I've had a couple people ask, why add a service now when we're about to move? And I wanted, maybe I feel like I need to be clear about this. It's going to take a while before we get to move.
It is. I know. It is.
Like, it's not hunker down for a couple of weeks. Like, it's going to be several months, and we're saying a year just sort of as a rule of thumb because the honest answer is we don't know how long it's going to take. Yep. But a year is sort of a reasonable sort of plot of time. Maybe we can do it before then. Either way, it's not like hold on for a couple of weeks. Yeah. It's several months.
Because if that was the case, then that idea makes sense. Just hold off. But like I said, we've held off as long as we
That's right.
felt we could.
No more holding off, says all the children's workers.
Yes.
And then another pretty big announcement, and this is we'll start announcing this coming Sunday. Mm-hmm. But we have an app now that is going to make communication, giving, signing up for stuff, getting podcasts, finding the online stream if you're online. It's going to make all that so much easier. Not that it's hard now, but it's practically frictionless on the app. It really works a lot better.
Kind of a one-stop shop. Aaron, how does a person get this app?
All right, here's how you get the app.
How's that work? Is that a good setup?
You get out your phone, because these apps are unlike. Look, you can do all this stuff on our website. but Webb's apps are designed native to phones. That it's just a easier experience. So go to whatever type phone you have. You go to the App Store, and you would think I'm going to search Maryville Vineyard. That would not be correct. You want to search Church Center. Church Center. So we have a management, a whole suite of products that we do for church management, and they offer the app. So you find Church Center, you download that app, you enable locations, it'll ask you for that, and then it will just pull up other churches in our area that are also using this app. And then you choose our church from the list, and then it will be a dedicated app just for our church. So it's not other churches in your experience.
Gotcha. Yep.
But once you download it and pick our church from the list, then it will be unique to us and all the stuff that we've got going on. And again, there's places to give. You can sign up for stuff. You can get sermon notes, sign up for a group, get the podcast, the live stream, all the stuff that kind of we need on the spot. On a Sunday especially, it's going to be right there. It's going to be a lot smoother. You hear about this more moving forward, but if you're a podcast listener, you can get it a few days early.
Yeah, this is the inside scoop. You're hearing it first.
That's it. All right, thanks, David. Well, hey, folks, I am here with Melissa Webb. Hey, Melissa.
Hey.
Thanks for taking a little bit of time to sit down and talk. You have a really cool testimony that I thought it would be good to share with the church. But for a little bit of context first, this is audio. This is not video. If this was video, then everyone would know exactly who you are and who I'm talking to because you're on the announcement video regularly. And you're on the stage singing regularly, and everybody would be like, oh, that's Melissa. So you do that. You've led groups. You were on our staff for a good little while there, a good while.
Yeah.
Doing more admin stuff, kind of behind the scenes, whereas now a lot of stuff you're doing is up front.
Scary stuff.
Yeah, but you're awesome at it. And what people may not know, because there's so many people who are new at our church, is like you're like a Vineyard OG, man. Like you go way back. Like you were one of the people who, like, when we said, hey, we're going to do a building campaign for the next building, who you remembered the building, it was a totally different thing, but the fundraising for this building.
Mm-hmm, I do.
And you asked questions about, remember we did this and that? And what was funny is I did not remember. It was all a blur to me. And you remembered.
I did.
So anyway.
It was a red pamphlet.
Yeah, that's right. I had Move. Remember that?
Yes.
Move
had
was
a box on
was
it.
our campaign name. Yeah. Move. It's like, well,
keyword,
that's
move.
Clear, if nothing else. People know what this is about. It is about moving. So you found so many places to serve in our church, and I'm so grateful. And one of the places you were serving was at our recent regional conference that our church helped host, and you helped us host it. And that's kind of where the story begins. We were somewhere in the middle of that conference. It was all a blur because it was super busy. And I got a text message from you asking for prayer. Do you remember that?
I do.
What was that about?
Andrew and I were at dinner. I think it was Tuesday night of the conference. And
Andrew, sorry to interrupt you.
Andrew's my husband. You've probably seen him on stage.
You've seen him play the drums.
He plays the drums.
And
He's tall.
He is very, very tall.
He's very tall and likes to wear a hat.
Yes.
But yeah, that's Andrew. So we're having dinner, and we were kind of just talking through the day. And I would say a couple months before, or several weeks before the conference, something happened. Like I had some sort of like episode, I guess is the only way I could describe it. I mean, I felt a physical touch from the Lord before, but I've never had like a physical episode like I had. And I mean, it was full body, out of control.
Like a really intense
encounter.
It was
very intense. I struggle with anxiety. I, sometimes feel overwhelmed, have had depression, but this feeling of overwhelm was an actual weighted feeling. Like I was just out of control, and it lasted about 20 minutes. I mean, I really can't even describe it. My head was hot. Like it was so weird. But it hurt my voice, like my vocal cords in this like I could not, my speaking voice wouldn't go above a certain
So this felt like
level.
an attack.
This was an absolute attack. I mean,
Yeah.
at the time, I'm just thinking I'm super overwhelmed by a lot of things in life. We're
Yeah.
remodeling the kitchen, or my job was moving offices. Like, it was just a lot, you know. And it lasted about 20 minutes. Andrew has his version of what happened as well. But it hurt my voice. And so it had bothered me since then, and we get to the conference. So we're singing, which is one of my favorite things to do. I love worship. I love anything Vineyard regional conferences, trainings, all the things. I'm here for it. And that morning, on Tuesday morning, we were singing in worship, as it always is awesome. And my voice just started hurting. My throat just felt like someone was like stabbing. My chest got really hot. Again, I couldn't go above like a certain spot in my range, I guess, where I normally can. And so I felt a little defeated, a little sad. I'm like, oh, I'm still dealing with whatever that was,
right?
You know? And so we're at dinner, and I'm just like really tired. I had taken a nap that day. Andrew went to spiritual direction. Like, so I was like, I have a little bit. I'm going to take a nap. Maybe I'll feel better. We go to dinner. I'm talking about it. And he's like, tell them you need prayer.
Yeah.
And I was like, why? That they're busy. You know, I'm not going to bother Aaron and Sharon, you know, hey, can you pray for me? Like, lay hands. I mean, there's people with actual problems at this conference. Like, I don't need to get prayer. You
I'm
know?
on Andrew's side with
I
this
can get
one.
prayer anytime from my pastors, you know. And he's like, no, right now, do it. And I was like,
for
okay,
him.
sure, why not? So I was like, well, I'll send a text, you know, that's easy. So I tell a little bit of the story of what happened and then how I was feeling, and could you all pray? You're like, sure, absolutely. I'm not certain exactly of the response, but you know, and I was like, okay, cool. They're going to pray for me. I'm good. So we finish dinner. We go get a coffee because I love some coffee, and we get back to the conference that evening, and we went through worship. I'm still having the issue, and so I couldn't sing.
You couldn't
really.
sing,
I couldn't
and it was
sing.
just the painful
burning, the stabbing.
stabbing.
Couldn't, like, even speaking was weird. So I was like, well, I just can't. So I'm just going to stop. And Josh Miller was on stage. Josh
Williams.
Josh Williams.
Josh Miller's the worship leader. Josh
That's
Williams
right.
was
That's
the
right.
speaker.
That's
Very
right. We
confusing.
hung out with Joshua Miller the whole time.
Yeah.
Okay, so Josh Williams.
Yeah.
He's he gets up to speak that evening. He's like the person, the keynote guy that evening. So. And he starts.
The Vineyard's Associate National Director of Justice and Evangelism, because we love some long titles in the Vineyard.
Exactly. I didn't remember that, but I remember he's a super cool dude.
Oh,
like,
he's
he
amazing.
was awesome. There was some Taco Bell the night before. I don't know, a big thing. Anyway, you can ask Annie about that. So, anywho, he gets up on stage and he starts to speak, and he's like, I feel like I need to talk about my wife, who is also an amazingly talented Vineyard worship leader.
Yes, she is.
And I'm sure there's other things in a title with her somewhere. But anyway, so he starts to talk about that she is having vocal issues, and she was, you know, she wasn't able to sing, and she had started going to see a specialist about it and what was going on, and she was facing surgery.
Yeah.
And so she goes to her pre-op appointment, and they're doing all the scans or whatever they do just to make sure and look at it. And like, it's whatever, it was like a cyst or something on her vocal cord, and it was gone, and there was a scar in its place. And I'm like, okay.
So your mind, your heart's racing. We're starting to race.
Yeah,
at
I'm
this
starting
point,
to like
right?
perk up a
It's
little
hitting
bit.
a little close to home.
Because I'm thinking,
Also-
maybe I need to go see somebody.
Also,
you know?
Sharon and I were sitting right in front of you.
Directly in front of me.
And I kept turning over and shooting glances your way. I don't know if you noticed or not.
I'm just like, and of course the whole time I'm just getting hotter and hotter, and my heart's beating faster and faster.
Sure.
And so, and then he says, you know, the scar's there.
Yeah.
And then I guess she went back a couple of weeks later just to make sure things had.
Yeah. The
still
scar
being
was there
on.
as if she had the surgery.
Yes.
That it looked just like a post-surgical scar for surgery she never had.
And she never had. She went for her pre-op,
Yeah.
and it had already happened.
Yeah. And if you don't believe in miracles, by the way, it's pretty hard to put that in the coincidence category. That's a real stretch.
Right. You can't science that
Yeah,
away.
that's
like,
tough. Yeah.
So she goes back, and like even the scar was gone. So like the Lord had fully healed her. And so the whole reason he's telling this story is he said, I feel like there's someone in the room that is having vocal issues or isn't able to sing. And the Lord's wanting to heal you today.
Yeah.
And I mean, of course, I'm just like, mouth drops, and you and Sharon turn around at the exact same time and just like in slow-mo and just like look at me. And I was just like, and my immediate thought was, you told him. That was my immediate thought, is that
that's hilarious.
Sharon had said, hey.
That never even crossed my mind.
I mean, I know you enough that you're not going to do that. But
yeah, because your doubts.
Immediately my doubting comes
Yeah, how do
in,
we explain this away?
And I've always said when I'm at the sing-togethers or any of that, so I'm always like, I want a word from the Lord. I want to hear from the Lord,
Sure.
And so he's like, all right.
Yeah, here it is.
Here we are. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I mean, that's...
So you stood because you had to stand.
We had to stand at that moment
prayer.
Because he said.
And you did quite quickly, and it's a good thing because Andrew would have thrown you to your feet.
I think so.
If you hadn't.
He would have been very disappointed had I hadn't stood up.
And so we gathered around and prayed, and there were other people around the room who were getting prayer, I think, for some other things, or maybe not related. I don't know. I don't remember the details. But then when we prayed for you, did you experience anything going on physically at that point? Was there anything? Were you aware of the Lord's Spirit at that time?
I was. So
okay.
you and Sharon prayed, and maybe others. I think Andrew was standing there, and you said, "Does anything feel different?"
Yeah.
And I said, "The burning's gone."
Yeah, I remember now.
And immediately I was like,
side note, Melissa, I'm going to interrupt just as the quick reminder, like if you're going to pray for someone in faith, believing that the Lord would heal them, doesn't it make sense that you would ask whether or not it worked?
Yes.
And so many times, and that's part of the Vineyard prayer model, the 5-step prayer model. You should look it up, Google that thing. But just hit pause and when you're praying for people and say, hey, did that work? Because we have a theology that makes it clear that it really might work. Mm-hmm. And also, we don't have to panic or judge anyone or cast aspersions if for some reason it didn't work. Mm-hmm. So why not ask? Now, that's just me jumping on a soapbox, but you jump right back into your story.
So the burning went away and you were like, okay, y'all kept praying. Mm-hmm. You just kept doing what you did. And then, we were done, and simultaneously, Andrew had been dealing with a low back pain. And while I'm being healed, his low back pain went away.
Yeah.
And he was immediately in tears as well. It's like we're both standing there like, oh my gosh, this is really happening. Not that we've ever doubted it, but I guess we did. I don't know.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. But, Lord, I believe, help my unbelief.
Yeah.
That's totally a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so since then, the voice?
So since then, that was on Tuesday.
Okay.
Wednesday, I heard from the Lord, I healed you, but now you need to rest.
Okay.
And so I just tried not to talk as much on Wednesday as much. I still sang that morning. It was fine. In worship, it was great. And I was so grateful. And I was like, okay, we're back. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Wednesday was awesome. Got to hang out with Joshua Miller again.
Right.
And then Thursday morning, the pain came back a little bit, just a little stab, and I was back to not being able to sing, and I was like, you've got to be kidding me.
Right.
I manipulated the situation. This really didn't happen.
Psychosomatic.
Who am I that the Lord would heal me? And Aaron Wright was singing some song, which I can't remember the song, but she's something in the song she said, and I was like, yeah. Oh. Yeah. And I said, you know what, Lord? I was defeated. I'm like, I sat down, actually. I was like, I can't sing. I'm just going to sit here.
Right.
And I said, no. You healed me the other day.
There you go.
And you are going to do it again.
There we go.
And he did.
Yeah.
So.
I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember just following up with you the next day and a little bit after that. Hey, is it, how are you feeling? You were like, all better? ? Can you sing? Yes? ? Mm-hmm. And it struck me as this really familiar feeling of people that I've personally experienced on the other side of healing, and I know many others have as well, where you go, was that really real? Did I manufacture that? Mm-hmm. Was it just, psychosomatic, to where some sort of mental thing that sort of shut off the pain because that's what I really wanted, but it wasn't really a divine touch? And I just think the enemy really plays on our fears in that regard. And it's interesting, this isn't always the case, but you can trace this back to a specific, I would even, like a demonic attack?
100%.
Okay, so a specific evil attack upon you. And so your context is, this is spiritual warfare. This is the enemy's attack. And so, and he's an enemy, but he's a defeated enemy. And then that enemy, that attack was handled the decisive blow that night when we prayed. But what is very common is the enemy will come back and to see if we will I don't understand it theologically. Honestly, Melissa, I don't have like a stack of verses for this, but I've just seen it and experienced it so many times where people will question and they'll say, was that really the Lord? And then it will try to creep back. And I've seen it come back and just stay back in people's lives. But there have been others who have said, they've done exactly what I'm so glad you just did intuitively, which is no, I am holding on to the gift that the Lord has already given me. If he's given it to me, then it's mine. I don't buy the name it, claim it stuff. But if he's already given it to you, then you can claim it. That's right. Because it's already been offered.
Yeah.
And so for you to say, no, this is my victory. Like the Lord's already done this. And it made it really clear this attack has to be over. By the Lord's decree, not by you, but by your faith and Christ in you. Like that was a piece of the puzzle. I had a similar experience. I experienced a healing in my neck. I had multiple discs that were, what's it called when they're squished? I can't think of the word right now. Squished discs. Somewhere a physician is listening and is just cringing all over because I just called it a squish. Anyway, they couldn't fix it, and the only thing they could do was surgery to fix it, and I just didn't want to do that. And there's a longer version of the story, but the short version is ultimately I received healing. I sought prayer. It was healed. It was gone, and like 100% gone, and it stayed gone. And like 6 months later, I was sitting in my office, and that familiar pain and the referred pain that it would send down my arm, it all came all at once. And I was in my office all by myself, and I stood up for no reason. Apparently, I'm going to make a decree, so I guess I'll stand. And I literally said, hell no. Yeah. And I didn't mean it like in the colloquialism, hell no. I meant literally, this is hell itself, and I'm saying no to hell. And then it went away, and that's been, I'm not good at times, 5 or 6 years ago, and it hasn't returned since. But that's a thing that happens. Mm-hmm. And on the other side of healing, I think the Lord can really, I'll say this, the enemy wants to attack because he's lost ground, and he wants to fight back in some way. And I think it's often in our own minds about whether or not we're going to accept what the Lord has done for us or allow him to cast doubt. And ultimately, even if the healing doesn't go away, but we can still lose the freedom that came from it because we're lost in our own minds trying to evaluate what did or didn't happen. Sure. And the bottom line is, I was there. We prayed, the kingdom of God came in power, you were healed, and the enemy's attack was thwarted, and it was awesome.
Well done.
Yeah. Speaking of well done, I really appreciate you coming and sharing your testimony.
Happy to.
Yeah, when God does stuff in the life of our church, it's good to tell the story.
Yes, it is.
Thanks, Melissa.
Thank you.
Well, hey, folks, I am here with Reverend Dr. Zachary Weaver. Thanks for joining us, Zach.
Yeah.
And if you guys don't know yet, Zach is our new kids pastor. And we actually haven't talked to the church much about this, but it's a bit of a dual role. Also our associate youth pastor. So you're helping things go.
Right.
Really with everybody 0 to 18, man. Like you kind of got the whole gamut there where you're at least involved. So I've known you, Zach, for like years and years, but it's been, hey, that's my sort of vague conference friend who, because you've been in the Vineyard for a good long time, you're new to Maryville, but I've known you as that guy at the conferences who I've spoken to a time or two. I think one time in Chattanooga conference, we sat down and talked for 30 or 40 minutes on what was going on in your church. And I remember that. I remember being, I like this guy. I'm impressed with this guy. This sharp guy. Just sort of put it away, a little mental note. And then through the weirdest turn of events, I never imagined that I would ever be talking to you about a position at our church. But here we are, man. But anyway, I'm getting ahead of things. Tell us, folks, I mean, so I know you. I know your backstory. The folks listening don't.
Yeah.
So like we've never met before, give us a little bit of your background, man.
Yeah, so I grew up in Oklahoma. It was a Southern Baptist church and went there all the way through into high school. And I got I've learned the language for it now, but when I was in high school, I didn't understand what deconstructing was.
Oh, I gotcha.
And I went through a long period of kind of deconstructing through high school and through college, and just started walking kind of away from the faith for a really long time. Probably better part of a decade, I would think. And in the meantime, went to college and met my wife.
In that deconstruction phase, if someone had asked you, hey, are you a Christian? Do you believe in God? What would your answer have been?
I'd have said no, absolutely not.
Oh, okay. So you were out.
Yeah, but it wasn't all at once. It wasn't just like I gave up. I was a real on-fire Christian. And I didn't... The thing I realize now is that I didn't have any relationship with God. I had the fear of God and I had the knowledge of God, but I didn't have the love of God.
Yeah.
And without the love of God, it didn't hold together under fire.
Yeah.
And so there was a lot of testing that came, as it does when you're a teenager, you go through a lot of that stuff, and just didn't hold up. Yeah. And I just slowly kind of backed my way through it until it eroded completely. And I just said, I'm done. I'm going to walk away.
Gotcha.
So I met Amy in the meantime at college, and that was still in Oklahoma, and we got married there, and that was in '99. So it's a long time ago. We've been married a long time.
Yeah, good for you, man.
And then we moved here, still not a believer, and started.
But Amy was.
Amy was.
Yeah.
I think the exact words of her parents, especially her dad, was, "You're not going to marry him, are you?" So,
fair enough, Zac.
I would probably have given the same advice in my case. I was
it
like,
all worked out.
I was like long hair, and I had a really scruffy beard. I think I smoked probably then. I was not like the most wholesome person you wanted to meet. But I got we started. I told her I'd go to church with her, and went to several churches, and finally a friend of ours got us connected with the Vineyard in Atlanta, which I had no knowledge of what Vineyard was. Started going and sat in church on a Sunday, and was not at all like following, really paying attention to the sermon, but the pastor...
Because you just went there to make Amy happy.
I did.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll tell you a funny backstory too. This will especially intrigue David because of my background in music and worship. I hated the music, and I would. This is no lie. I would sit in the parking lot during worship and then come in for the preaching.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah. So anyway. Yeah, right. So anyway, I came into the sermon and I was not really paying attention, but he said something that really resonated with me. And I had just one of those encounters with the Holy Spirit. And church was over. He did a quote unquote altar call. And Amy said, "Hey, you're ready to go?" And I said, "I don't think I can." And she said, "What do you mean? You're not feeling good?" And I said, "I think I have to go down front." And she was like... She didn't know what I was trying to... It took her a minute to go...
She had no expectation.
No, she didn't realize at all. And it was one of those radical changes. So it was like 180-degree change from the way I was walking.
And that was your first Sunday back. Oh, no, you said you've been to some other churches. It was your first Sunday at the Vineyard. No.
It was a long time of churches, of Sundays into the Vineyard. There just wasn't any expectation of it. Amy was serving. She was doing kids ministry, doing worship with the little kids and all of that.
So you lingered around.
I did.
And then just one day, boom, it hit.
One day, it
just
grabbed me. And I went down front, and then it was just like God had me on a track after that point. So I started meeting with the pastor, talking about like leadership and pastoring and going down that road. So we went down kind of a discipleship path there, led to small group leadership, led to eventually, this is on a different track, but led to worship leading. That eventually led to kind of an associate pastor role, and then eventually called to plant a church.
Yep.
And that all happened from like 2008 to 2014. So it was like a 6-year track.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that seems like a long time, but that's not a long time to go from zero to filling all those roles and significant leadership in a significant church with a lot going on and getting mentored and discipled. So there was a lot of moving parts. And then you went off to plant the church.
I did.
And that was Atlanta area as well, right?
It was. Suburb of Atlanta. Lilburn, Tucker, that kind of area. So
Sure. I just said as if I knew where that was, but I was just being affirming.
you're just being nice. Yeah.
Just
Nobody
being
knows where any of those are.
I was like, okay, cool. All right.
No, it was our community. There was a whole group of us that all lived in that community, and the Atlanta Vineyard was moving more toward downtown Atlanta, which was opposite of kind of where we were situated. So it was starting to become a commuter church for us. And we had already felt the call of God calling us to plant the church, and so we decided to plant in our local area with some local people. Yeah.
So you led that church for a good long stretch too.
Almost 9 years.
Almost 9 years.
Yep.
It's a long time to lead a church.
It was.
Yeah. Learned some stuff.
I did.
Got some bruises.
Yep.
Got some stories, some wins, some losses, all the stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really good. So let me sort of rewind here, because there's this other sort of story in your life with music.
Right.
So why don't you kind of give me that piece of the picture?
Yeah. So my background, I mean, it has really nothing to do with ministry or with any of that. I grew up loving to play music. Played the piano since I was a little kid. I was probably some of my earliest pictures my parents have of me before I can remember is like 2 or 3 years old, sitting down in front of the piano.
Oh, wow.
So, I'm going on 42 something years of probably playing the piano and 40 something of doing it seriously.
Yeah.
And, I ended up going to college though on a French horn. If you're a music person, then that's the horn. But for everybody else, that's the French horn.
Okay.
French horn scholarship was a performance major.
Okay.
And my goal was I wanted to be in the symphony. I wanted to be a professional horn player. And I was
horn. The horn player.
Yeah, that's what they call it. It's that's a whole other. This is like a rabbit
Sounds
hole you
arrogant
don't
to me,
need to
Zac.
go down. Yeah, This is going to take longer. So I was on track for that, and things were moving in that direction. Was quickly starting to find my way through that path, and my end of my sophomore into my junior year, I had something happen with my mouth that completely derailed all of those plans. So if you were an athlete, you'd say like, "Oh, I tore my hamstring, I tore my ACL, whatever it is, can't."
Right.
Keep doing what I was doing. That's basically what happened.
Really?
I mean, my ACL of my face.
Yeah.
So anyway,
Your face CL.
my face CL
I apologize
was
to all
messed
listening.
up. So anyway, I was not able to continue.
Yeah.
My guidance counselors there, my whatever you'd call them, I went and met with all of them and said, I don't know what to tell you. I can't do what's required because you have to play certain things. You have to be able to do certain roles and concerts and pass things. It's all for a grade. And I couldn't do it. And they said, well, you can't keep doing horn. So you're going to have to stop with that. You can't keep going on this track because they said it in nicer words. They basically, you're going to fail out of school. And so they said, do you play any other instruments? Because you're already on the track for music. You might as well stay on it. Do you do anything else? So I play piano, but I have not done it seriously. It's just kind of a fun thing I do on the side. And they said, we'll make a meeting with you and the head of the piano department. You go meet with them, and let's see what they say.
Yeah.
And this guy took me under his wing. He heard me play. I was playing, now that I know, like very basic rudimentary stuff compared to what it was.
Right.
And in 2 years, he took me from that to the level that all the other piano majors were playing in college.
Oh, wow.
And it took, we were hours.
I know.
It was like 30 hours a week of practice to get into this. And he just poured into me, and he poured more than just teaching. He taught me like how to do it, how to teach well, how to believe, and how to, so
that's really incredible.
It was, and it turned that put my life on a completely different trajectory.
Yeah.
I went from being you
were in crisis, man, and then
I was.
Yeah, and then he recognized that.
He did,
and walked with you. Man, that's really. I don't know that. I don't even know his name. I think he might be my hero. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. He passed away a few years ago. It was a sad day.
Yeah. Well, now I'm heartbroken. This has been quite the roller coaster ride.
You started this. No. But he mentored me through so much of that, and I was on track then for piano performance, graduated, decided that I probably didn't have enough training to be a piano professor. Or to go off and do that professionally. But my other thing that I'd been doing since I was young was writing music. And when we talk writing music, we're talking classical music, Beethoven, Mozart, Haydn, this kind of writing music. So I decided to get a degree in that. Okay. So I went and got a master's in that and graduated with that and decided I wanted to become a professor teaching music theory, music composition, and so I went to UGA, got accepted in their doctoral program, graduated with that in 2010.
Like you do, get the doctorate.
You know, it's just all the things. And if you're going to start something, you got to finish it. So
I love it.
They call it a terminal degree for a reason. So it was the end. But I did eventually graduate, and then I got a job teaching at Emory. My first year out, and it was a temporary position for a year. And they asked me after I was done if I would apply. And that year was enough for me to realize that I absolutely did not want to be a college professor.
Wow.
And I stopped that in its tracks. And poured myself into private teaching, which is what I'd been doing to make money, and somehow along the way realized that that was my heart and my passion.
Yeah.
And the university was not about teaching as much as it was about publishing and making a name for yourself in the university. And I was way more concerned with making the kids' names than I was with making mine. And so I just decided that's where I wanted to go. And dedicated that to full time, and then that was 20 years later, still doing that. So,
I love it.
Yeah,
I love it. So you've kind of been on these parallel paths. So as you've been finding life with Jesus and then landing in ministry and filling a lot of different roles, planning a church, leading a church, at the same time, you're on this other path where you're teaching mostly kids, right?
5 to 18.
Wow.
Some adults, but not very many.
Yeah. Teaching them at some interesting with your PhD, teaching sometimes little kids the most basic stuff.
Yep. Absolutely my favorite ones to teach, by the way.
Yeah. So why is that?
I love the excitement that little kids have toward it. And there's something about being able to take a really complicated, complex concept and break it down into something bite-sized for a little kid and watch them get it and go, man, it took me 3 degrees to understand that. And I'm able to get them to understand it in just like a 30-minute lesson.
Yeah, it's magic.
It is. It's like magic. And it's so encouraging and exciting to watch them. And I love it.
I love it. I love that part of your story, man. So these two paths are kind of running parallel. And then tell us about the transition of the last year or so, and then how this randomly, the Maryville Vineyard, ended up in your life.
Oh, boy. Yeah, that's a lot of story. So about a year ago, actually a little bit longer than that, in just through quiet times and talks with people and Amy and I sitting down together, we started hearing God saying that a time of transition was coming. I have some journals from 2019. When COVID hit, I thought, well, that's obviously what it was.
Right.
And it just seemed like a no-brainer. This is what God was preparing me for, but it wasn't. And so let me say a side note. I have in my life, there are like 3 things that I'm really passionate about. I'm really passionate about Jesus. I'm really passionate about my family.
Yeah.
And I'm really passionate about teaching. And the way it was going is that all 3 of these were a tug of war in my life. And there was I was getting stretched so thin that I didn't have bandwidth to do any of them well. So if I decided I was going to pour into the church, everybody else and all my students were getting eliminated from that. If I pour into my family, something's getting left behind.
Yeah.
And it got to the point that it was just this unsustainable path.
Sure.
And prayed about it and kept praying about it, met with the leadership team at the church, said, this is where we are. Pray with us about this, about what God's telling us. And as we kind of walked through this process, we really felt like God was calling us to lay down the ministry at the church. Not to deconstruct, not to step away from church, not to give up on God, but to recognize that this is not what He'd called us to. And
I've heard you tell the story a couple
that.
of times, and it's not at all ever sounded at all like a crisis of faith. It's just been more about just direction and what's next. But when you're stepping away from leadership of a church, it feels like a crisis, even if it's just hearing the kind voice of the Lord who's taking you through a transition. It's still a hard one. Yeah. And then, so tell us,
all right,
how do we end up here then? What's the next step in that?
All right. So, because we were a Vineyard church, I reached out to, and the Vineyard's set up to have a hierarchy of, we've got our local church, and we have our area leader, we have a regional leader, super regional, and it goes through that setup. I don't know why I'm telling you this. You know all of this.
That's all right.
I feel like I need to inform the other people about,
the listener.
I don't know why. Yeah, the listener about this. Anyway, I reached out to our area leader and our regional leader, who just happened to be Sharon McCarter.
The good bishop.
That's it. And so I reached out to them and told them, this is what we feel like God is telling us. What's our next step? And they said, there is no next step. Good luck. Not exactly that, but it was kind of like that. And we began to walk through that process together, recognizing there was a need for more than just, there isn't anything here to step out of this. And so we began to walk through this process with a lady named Angela Otero, who was our area leader. Awesome. And then, she is. And Sharon, together, and through a lot of emails, a lot of phone calls back and forth. And at some point, so we've already now officially stepped down from the church in Atlanta, though I've still been serving up to a certain point. At some point, Sharon said, and I think I've got the email, I saved it because I thought it was great, something like, this may be the worst idea ever, but we have an opening at our church for a full-time children's pastor and associate youth pastor.
And of course, you'd been staying up all night thinking about kids ministry. It's the lifelong dream.
And she and she said, you never know what God might be doing. And it was that last line that I couldn't escape. No, my initial answer, not to her, but just in my mind when I read it, was, well, absolutely not. I just got out of the ministry. I'm not even done. I'm definitely not stepping back into it. Had no plans to. And so I told her I would pray about it. I think that was where I left it. And I told Amy, and Amy said, well, absolutely not. And I said, great, we are on the same page. That's right. And I said, but I promised her we'd pray about it. And the more we prayed about it, and the more we prayed about it, the more we realized that God was, that opportunity here, the opportunity here, would pull into sync those three areas of our life: the passions of Jesus, family, and teaching, except in a way that all surrounded one role and one place. And
so now you can serve one not to the exclusion of the other, but to the benefit of the other.
That's a great way to put it. Yeah. That's it. Yeah. So Sharon said I had to make a resume. I've been self-employed for 22 years. I didn't have a resume, and I didn't know what I was going to put on a resume. And I kind of thought it was, I was going to be funny with my resume. So I put everything together, and it was mostly all like my references were myself because I've worked for myself for so long.
Yeah.
I didn't know what else to put. So I was just trying to cram information in there, and I put the silly things in there and all of that. And then I realized who the interview was going to be with and realized that silliness was not going to go well. So I was pretty sure when I got done with the interview that I was not going to be on that on the short list of whatever was happening. But I told Amy that no matter what happens, this wasn't something I was planning on or something I was counting on. So I'm just going to be myself.
Yeah.
Go into that.
I'm so glad you did.
Let's see what happens, what God does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, man, you could really feel that just through the interview process. And we have sort of a long, involved process because I don't mind admitting this. I have a fair bit of anxiety when it comes to hiring people. The stakes are so high. I don't want to get wrong. It matters so much. I care so much. These are people's lives, and so I get so wrapped up into it. Yeah. It was just such an encouraging process with you. It was so clear that you just wanted to follow the Lord and be a godly father and say yes to Jesus. Yeah. And I remember one of the things that really stood out to me in that process, maybe the thing that stood out the most, and maybe you could say it better than me, but this idea that in teaching music, you went all the way kind of up to the highest levels, so you could teach adults, and then you found yourself drawn to the idea of teaching kids, and that's what I really love. Right. And then you kind of did the same thing in ministry, as you filled all these roles, but then you ended up as a lead pastor teaching adults, and then discovering, hey, I really want to teach kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the similarities are huge in it, and it's not lost on me that I feel like that's, in hindsight, what God really was calling me to all along, was a way of being able to take complex things and teach it on a basic level.
Yeah, but without losing its essence or its beauty.
Getting people... So I think I talked to you about this at one point, but there's this concept in music called arranging, where you basically take, let's say, a symphony, and you want to play it on the piano. Well, you can't play all the parts, so you have to eliminate some stuff. And if you're a master level player, you're going to play a lot of the parts. And as you say, well, I'm only intermediate, you strip away some of it, still leaving the most important parts of that symphony intact. And you can still say, well, I want to play this as a beginner. And honestly, one of the beginner songs we teach on the piano is Beethoven's Ode to Joy. But it's all stripped away. And the only thing that's left is with that main melody, just that da 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 da.
Oh, there it is. Yeah.
And the kids get to play that, and they go, I've got the essence of it. Now I can't, you have to pick which parts are the most salient features, and you say, that's the one I want in there.
Yeah, that's great.
And that's the thing I love. I love being able to take the concepts of the gospel, the big ideas in Scripture, and go, how do we teach that to the kids that are the most susceptible to this information, because they soak it up like a sponge.
Yeah, that's right.
And we want to build this foundational system with them. We want to say, we taught them all the main and the plain. We taught them the big things.
Yeah.
And then we build on it as they grow up. So when they get to a bigger level, we teach them bigger stuff. But they haven't missed out on it just because they're little.
Yeah,
so.
I love it. I love it. Because, my son played piano for a while, and I remember him saying, I'm playing Beethoven.
There you go.
And he was. And anyone who heard it would go, oh, I know that tune.
Right.
Because the essence was there. And it wasn't just Mary Had a Little Lamb.
Right.
Which is fine.
Which is good, but it's not Beethoven.
And that's so much what we want to do with our kids' ministry too. We want them to get the essence and the heart of the gospel. We want our kids to learn how to walk with Jesus and love their neighbor.
That's it.
And not just, and it's great for the kids to know the biblical stories, but it's more than just handing down a collection of stories. It's knowing the essence, as you said, the most salient points that carry along the real beauty of the gospel itself.
Yep.
I love hearing you say that, man. And it makes me excited for our kids' ministry, because I never want to hear somebody say, we'll dumb it down for the kids. It's like, no. We'll get it to what you're saying. The very essence of its beauty. That's what we're going to do. Let the kids get that. And so I every time you've spoken about that, I've just been so encouraged and hopeful for our kids, man. So I'm almost hesitant to ask you how the transition's going, because it has been a wild couple of months since you moved here. I mean, there's just been a lot. And I don't know how many times I've apologized, but man, did you get deep-ended. You showed up, and then it was immediately, I don't know if I won't get it right, but it was youth camp, and then it was kids camp, and then it was something else, and it was the regional conference. Yeah, just like entire weeks of like deep immersion into things. Your heads were spinning. You're like, names, man, so many names.
Oh yeah,
trying to keep track of things. And I could relate even now, as someone who's been here the whole time. I'm feeling the same way. But with all that said, I've been encouraged by some of the conversations we've had about the vision of the kids ministry moving forward. And specifically the language you've used around spiritual formation of kids. So that's formation is one of our core values. And we don't want our core values to just be for the adults. We want it to be all across the board. So what would you say to some of those things? The formation piece in particular.
Yeah, that the idea, just like it is what I was talking about with music, is that there needs to not just be something that's isolated. You know, we have this tendency sometimes in ministry to compartmentalize things, and we say this is for the adult ministry, and then we have a youth thing, and we have a kids thing, and we have a worship thing, and we end up having all of these things, but they don't play well together.
Yeah, they're like appendages.
Yeah, right. And it's really my heart that the things that are important and valuable to the adults should be the things that are important and valuable that we're teaching our kids. I mean, that's what we do in a family, right? I mean, if I value it as a dad, but I don't show my kids that and I don't teach them that, then am I raising them in that same vein? Are we all part of the same thing? I mean, that's what Moses talked to about the people in the desert, right? I mean, he said, teach these to your kids and do it all the time, so that in the generations to come, they'll know why we did all of this stuff. I mean, I want to see my kids noticing that, there's a lot of stuff that we're doing, but I want them to understand why we do it and why it's important. And so it's not about dumbing it down, and it's not about teaching something different. It's about teaching something that's digestible to kids, that they can take in and convert into something that's going to function. And so, you know, you and I have talked about this, the big idea that when we have some of these bigger moments that we're talking about in the church, of figuring out how we can incorporate that into the youth and into the kids ministry as well, so that they're on board.
Which you've already done, right? With
we're
Live No
doing
Lies?
it right now with Live No Lies. We're doing the Armor of God, and we're titling the whole thing is called Battleground, and it's been great to offer the parents something that they can talk to their kids about and say, I learned about that verse. You know, Pastor Aaron talked about that in church. What did you learn? I learned the same verse. And you get these conversations around the table. And I don't think it's something we want to do all the time, but I think it's something that for really important moments, when we think like these are our structural components we're dealing with in the church, that we want to bring these to everybody. I mean, the Vineyard idea that everybody gets to play is just, it really plays out well in the kids ministry. I mean, I want to see the kids equipped to do the stuff, and then I want to see them empowered to say, you can do it. Not just we taught you how to do it, now go do it.
Yeah, man, kids can hear from Jesus.
It's unbelievable.
Somewhere we get it categorized that like hearing from the Lord is only for really varsity Christians or people who've been doing it for a really long time. And then actually, if we're walking with Jesus, then hearing from Jesus is like breathing. It's just what you do. It's what you would expect. And there are many ways in which kids just aren't caught up into their own weird evaluations of things like we often are. And in my experience, man, sometimes kids hear more clearly from the Lord. And I know you feel the same way. I've loved this expectation that like the Holy Spirit stuff is not just for the adults. No. It might even be, at least if not more so, for the kids.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm excited, man. I'm excited about where it's going. I'm excited about a move coming up eventually. I know it's going to take a while, but there'll be more kid space because I know you guys have been pretty squeezed in there. But more kid space is coming.
Yeah,
more services coming.
I don't know about that part.
Yeah. So there's always more, man. But man, we're so excited about you being here and in this role. Is there anything else you wanted to add, or did we cover most of our bases?
Yeah, I think we did. I mean, I think when it comes to kids and it comes to adults, I mean, I used to teach my music students that when you fill your life with music, when it's something when you practice it and when you listen to it and you read it and you play it for fun and you talk about it and you write it and you do all of those things, then it becomes something that you not only grow in, but it's also something that becomes like a lifelong passion.
Yeah.
That's really what I want to see with the kids. So, I mean, it's important that we give them tools to realize that we're not doing something just on Sunday morning. This isn't like I leave church. I mean, I know that's probably your heart for, like, that's kind of all of our hearts, right? Church isn't just Sunday. It's not something we do
Jesus,
on Sunday. That's the thing. We need to give practical applications to walk this stuff out so that the kids have tools, because the world is difficult.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of dangerous and tricky stuff out there, and we need to equip them well.
Yeah.
So.
Amen. Well, thanks so much. We're just celebrating that you're here. We're so fired up. I know it's been a lot at the beginning, and transitions are still ongoing, but you're doing an awesome job. You figured this out probably before you even came, but filling the shoes of a legend with one Natasha stepping in, and Natasha's celebrating. Parents are celebrating because God has clearly called you to this, placed you in this for this time at this season in the life of our church. So like as God has been sort of orchestrating your life, he's been orchestrating our church. It's so clear that it's by his providence he's brought you here, man. And we're just celebrating. We're so excited that God brought you to us, man.
Thank you.
Yeah, man. Thanks for taking a few minutes to talk with us.
Yeah, thank you. Loved it.
See ya. Well, hey, folks, this is Aaron. I'm here with Sharon. And
Hello.
An update quickly. We're going to roll out a policy, and it's weird. We're pretty laid back, folk. We don't write policies just for the sake of it. But from time to time, we realize, hey, as a church, it's going to be good for us to have something in writing. It will be kind. It will be loving to our church body. It will serve them well if we take the time to think through an important issue, put some things on paper so that our church understands how we can operate within a policy. And so we've rolled out a policy. There'll be a link to it in the show notes so that you can read it yourself. But a policy on the subject of alcohol, which is, man, that's an emotionally charged subject.
Yeah.
There's a lot of debate among like honest, sincere, Bible-believing Christians who don't necessarily land in the same spot. And we said, okay, there's actually some stuff to work through here. It would be kind if we made something available to our congregation.
Yeah, I think it's been good to put it all in writing and sort of have the meetings and all the conversations, because it's something that just kind of just continues to come up over the years. Mm-hmm. And you've done really good sermon series about,
we've hit the topic.
Yeah, well, and you can't just send people a link to the sermon series, and it's like, okay, well, what does that mean to our church? And so we're like, okay, like, this is kind of where we stand and what we believe as a church. But then here's a policy that's like, so because of that, then this is how we will act and we will interact with one another. And so I just think it just, we always say clarity is kindness.
Yeah.
And so we just tried to write a policy so it would be clear. So people aren't in awkward situations. They don't know what's right or what's taboo or, so we're just trying to help clarify things.
Yeah, and people are asking, or it's not often, but from time to time, people ask a really fair, honest question. It's like, well, that deserves a pretty thorough answer, so let's take some time. So, for example, obviously we don't serve alcohol at church.
No.
But we we do events all over town and we're at restaurants, at places that do serve alcohol, and people go, how exactly are we supposed to navigate that?
Yeah.
And how do I navigate the fact that maybe some people in my small group choose abstinence and don't drink any alcohol. Others choose to drink in moderation, and so, okay, we need to give some direction. That seems kind.
Well, yeah. And even our communion obviously is grape juice.
Yes.
And some people were like, well, why don't we have wine? This is the Vineyard.
Right. And that is what historically most churches throughout history have done. Why aren't we?
Doing wine? And so it's like, well, for lots of reasons, because we do have, brothers and sisters who believe that they're absolutely supposed to abstain. We do have people who struggle with alcoholism or recovering addicts or whatever. And so we just don't, and we have kids, just like taking those little snackables or whatever we say. And so it's just easier. And the most loving thing to do, especially on a Sunday morning, is to have juice, to not have, even the smell of it around.
Yeah. And that, you said the most loving thing to do, and that's really what drives it. What is the most loving thing to do? I went to a church service in another denomination with a friend of mine who had been an alcoholic and had not consumed alcohol in years. And we went up to take communion at this service. He was given alcohol, or it was wine, and he didn't know. He wasn't prepared for it, and I didn't even think about it. I don't think I even noticed. And I sat down next to him because we got up to receive communion. And I sat down next to him, and he grabbed my leg and was like squeezing it. And he goes, "Aaron, you have to pray for me. I am terrified." He said, I haven't had alcohol in years, and I'm so afraid that, and I didn't even, it took me a while to even catch on to what was going on. And I thought, this is an open gathering. Anyone is welcome.
Right.
You don't want to run the risk of doing that. So again, that goes back to the driving thing. What is the most loving thing to do in a world where like honest, sincere, Bible-believing, amazing Christians differ and have a variety of positions.
Yeah.
So anyway, our take on this is there's basically 4 positions that people hold on the subject of alcohol. 2 of them are biblical, and 2 of them are not. So this isn't, you have to be exactly where we are at all, but somewhere in that biblical range. Okay?
That would be good.
Yeah, that would be good. We're Bible people. The first position, we'll start from kind of the most conservative to least. The first is prohibition. And so prohibition says, I'm not going to drink alcohol, and I prohibit anyone else from drinking alcohol because it's a sin. And so, and that is not a biblical position because the Bible does not teach that under all circumstances it's always a sin to drink alcohol. And so, even though for some it absolutely is, and if the policy actually goes through very carefully and explains why that's our understanding. It's a profoundly, and it's a historically Orthodox Christian position for sure. So prohibition, that means we're prohibiting something, we're calling something a sin that the Bible doesn't actually call a sin. And then there's some important ramifications of that, because in Scripture we see Jesus consuming alcohol. If we call it a sin, then we're calling Jesus a sinner, and kind of our whole theology falls apart at that point.
Yeah, that's not a good way to go about it. Yeah.
And I really understand the sensibility behind the prohibition position. It's like, hey man, this thing is really powerful. It's hurt lots and lots of people. It's been a scourge on society in so many ways. Wouldn't we be better off if we all just said no always? And I've asked the Lord that question. I didn't get an answer, but that's a fair question, because it has done such damage. But the bottom line is, we are not going to add laws or add rules, and certainly laws or rules that would then indict God himself. So we're just not going to do that.
Yeah.
So that's prohibition. The second position is abstinence, and abstinence is, I choose to abstain from alcohol. You may do as you choose. And that is an absolutely biblical position. There are lots of reasons, and again, it's in the policy. It's a significant list of reasons for which people they may in fact need to abstain from alcohol always, and it may in fact be a sin for them.
Right.
One of the most blatant ones is it's a sin to do anything that goes against your conscience.
Absolutely.
And if you're like, hey man, this just doesn't settle well with me, that alone is reason enough for you to abstain and for it to be a sin for you not to abstain.
Right. Like if you feel guilty or if you feel shame or whatever that is, it's like, okay, like that might be the Holy Spirit. That might be you just needing to work things out with the Lord, but it's probably not for you.
Yes. If you can't worship Jesus with a drink in your hand, then you shouldn't have a drink in your hand.
It's a really good way to put it. It helps people. Yeah.
Yeah. And then other just practical reasons. If you signed a covenant saying that you wouldn't because you're at a conservative college, if you are under 21 because we obey the laws of the land, on and on.
Those are integrity issues, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And most importantly, if for some reason it is harmful to someone else for you to not abstain, then you must abstain because, again, the law of love is the highest law.
Yeah.
The third position, so there's prohibition, abstinence. The third position is moderation, which is I'm going to drink not in excess. I'm going to drink in moderation, and others may do as they choose, and that is a biblical position.
Yeah.
We see many examples of people consuming alcohol, and it's not listed as a sin. Drunkenness, for sure, is listed as a sin in Scripture. It's just so black and white that there is no reasonable argument to be made otherwise. It is a sin. But to drink in moderation is not something that is forbidden in Scripture. And if you're able to do that in love, if you're able to do that in a situation that doesn't harm your conscience, that doesn't hurt others, that isn't a potential stumbling block to others, if you are thoughtful and wise and deliberate and measured and mature enough to handle it, and that's a whole stack of reasons why you may or may not be.
Right. And you need to know your limits, and you need to know the limits of even your spouse. And we've talked a lot of that before. Like if it makes the people around you uncomfortable or whatever it is, it's like you need to have these open conversations and make sure that that if you are going to have alcohol, that you're not making anyone around you feel really uncomfortable.
Yes. If you choose to drink in moderation, there will be times, for sure, where the law of love dictates that you abstain.
Yeah.
And if you're not willing to submit to that, then you've just got to be in the abstinence category and just not partake.
Yeah, the whole like you can't flaunt it or in front of people or because you have permission or that kind of thing. That doesn't feel like the heart of God.
Absolutely not. Yeah, and the Bible's really explicit about that too. And then the fourth position is excess or drunkenness. And the Bible, again, we've already said it's so unbelievably clear. I just don't understand how anyone could love the Bible and say that drinking alcohol in excess is okay.
Yeah.
And so that's not a biblical position. So the two extremes, prohibition and drunkenness or excess, those are not biblical positions. And the two positions in the middle, where you choose abstinence or you choose moderation, either way, provided you are first and foremost submitted to the highest law, which is love of neighbor, then those are biblical positions. And so what the policy does is says, okay, how do we think through these things? How do we understand them biblically? And then how do those things work themselves out in the context of, for example, a church gathering?
Yeah.
And so we work through those.
Well, there's always so many questions. It's like, okay, so if my small group gets together, can we have alcohol at our small group? Well, what if we all go bowling, or what if we all go out to dinner, or what if we're just friends that happen to be in a small group, but we're going out to, all those questions. And so it gets complicated. And so we're not trying to further complicate it. We're just we're just trying to uncomplicate it.
Well, what the policy definitely does not do is address every possible situation.
Right.
I wouldn't even want to try.
No.
But it does give us the guardrails, which again, I just keep saying it. It's the law of love. You do it in service and love to neighbor. And that's what governs it all. And then, of course, it makes us, our staff, available to people to sort of process it, because we don't look at this and see anything simple. We see difficult, complicated, challenging, like what does it look like to be wise and loving and kind? So, and so that's why we took the time to write the policy. By the way, this wasn't just Aaron wrote a paper. Our ecclesiastical board, which governs matters like this, ecclesiastical matters in the life of our church, met, discussed, decided upon the need, spent quite a bit of time discussing it, then commissioned me to write a paper. And then we went through rounds of edits to make sure that we were kind of at peace about that.
Sure. And where do we find the paper?
There's a link to it in the show notes, and from that direct link we can get to it anytime.
Great.
Yep, and we'll make it as clear as we can, and moving forward we'll make it more widely available to the church as well. But it's public now.
Helpful, very helpful.
All right, thanks for chatting about it, Sharon.
All right. Yeah, thanks.